There are sounds all around us. The hum of traffic, the ping of notifications, the soft buzz of conversation, news headlines swirling on screens, and even the worries inside our minds, each competing for space, each demanding our attention. We live in a world full of noise, and sometimes it feels like God's voice gets drowned in the static. But what if He hasn't stopped speaking? What if His voice is still whispering, steady, gentle, constant, beneath it all? In the stillness of early morning, before the world has fully woken up, there is a sacred quiet. If you've ever sat beside a window with your coffee in hand, watching the sky brighten little by little, you've tasted that peace. That is where God often speaks, not in the loud and the grand, but in the quiet. Not in thunder, but in a whisper. We see this in the story of Elijah. After the prophet had fled to the mountains, overwhelmed and afraid, he looked for God. First came a mighty wind, then an earthquake, then fire. But God was in none of those. And then came a still, small voice, a whisper. And Elijah covered his face because he knew God was there. Kings 19:11-13. The same is true today. God doesn't shout over the world's chaos. He invites us to lean in closer. He wants to be heard not in the noise, but beyond it. But how do we begin to listen? It starts with intention. Hearing God's voice isn't about volume, it's about tuning. Just as you can't hear a soft melody while blasting another song in your ears, you can't hear the divine whisper unless you choose to turn the volume down on other things. That doesn't mean you need to live in a cabin far from the city. It means creating small pockets of quiet, a walk without your phone, a moment in prayer before your day begins, a deep breath before reacting. These moments open space. But here's the challenge. Silence can be uncomfortable. When the noise fades, we often start hearing things inside us, doubts, guilt, fears, that we've kept hidden under distractions. Yet it's in that raw, honest silence that God meets us. He's not afraid of your fears. He doesn't walk away from your questions. In fact, He steps closer. Think of it like this. If your soul were a crowded room, God doesn't burst in demanding attention. He waits by the door, gently knocking, Revelation 3:20. When you let Him in, He sits with you, not to overwhelm, but to be present. And His presence brings a peace that no noise can mimic. In a world that values fast replies, instant answers, and constant motion, God moves differently. He speaks slowly. He speaks deeply. He waits for you to want to hear Him, not out of pressure, but out of love. And when you do, when you truly seek Him with your heart, you begin to hear. Maybe not in words, maybe not in thunder, but in a soft knowing, a gentle nudge, a verse that suddenly feels alive, a peace that settles where there used to be confusion. So today, as the noise of life surrounds you, remember, God hasn't gone quiet. His voice is still near. You just have to make room for it. Learning to hear God in a noisy world isn't about unlocking a secret formula. It's about learning the language of stillness, a way of being, not just a moment of quiet. And the more time you spend in that stillness, the more clearly you begin to recognize the patterns of His voice. It's not always in words. Sometimes it's in clarity. Sometimes it's in conviction. Sometimes it's in the courage to keep going when you feel like stopping. You might ask, how do I know it's God's voice I'm hearing, and not just my own thoughts? That's a question many people carry, and it's an important one. Because in a world filled with so many influences, both outside and within, it takes discernment. The voice of God carries certain marks. It is gentle, never frantic. It calls you toward peace, not panic. It speaks with truth, even if it's challenging. It aligns with His word, always. When God speaks, even when the message is hard, it never crushes your soul. It convicts, but it doesn't condemn. That's the difference. Guilt and fear often come with noise. God's voice brings light, like opening a window in a dark room. That light might reveal things you'd rather not see, but it also shows the way forward. That's how you know it's Him. Many times, His voice is not a sentence at all. It's an awareness, a prompting, a sudden softness in your spirit that says, "Wait, don't speak yet." Or "Go ahead, call that person, forgive them." Or simply, "Be still, I'm here." That is the whisper of God. Not loud, but alive. And it always brings you back to His presence. Let's pause here for a moment. Can you remember a time when you felt something inside you stir? A sense of rightness, of clarity that came from beyond you? Maybe you were about to make a rushed decision, but something quiet inside told you to wait. Or perhaps you were in pain, and in the silence after your tears, you felt a peace that didn't make sense. That was Him. That was the still, small voice. Jesus said in John 10:27, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." He didn't say His sheep understand every word perfectly. He said they listen. Listening takes practice. It's not instant. It grows through time spent with Him. Time in Scripture, in prayer, in worship, in quiet surrender. And slowly His voice becomes familiar. Like a dear friend you recognize not because of volume, but because of presence. One of the simplest ways to begin is to return to His word. Not as a chore, but as a conversation. Before reading, whisper a short prayer. "God, speak to me," then pause. Open slowly. Let the words sink in. If something stirs your heart, stop there. Don't rush. Sit with it. Maybe a single verse is enough for the day. Maybe that verse will echo later when you need it most. That's how God works. His voice echoes through the quiet parts of our day when we've made space for Him. Another way is to write. Keep a journal, not of impressive thoughts, but of honest moments. Write your prayers. Write your questions. Write what you think He might be saying. Over time, you may notice how consistent His nudges are, how His voice doesn't change with the trends of the world or the mood of the day. He speaks the same yesterday, today, and forever. And perhaps the most overlooked way to hear Him is to rest. Not just sleep, but soul rest. Step away from the noise. Lay down the burden of needing to have it all figured out. God often speaks when we stop striving. He waits until our defenses are down, until we are tired enough to listen without resistance. Because God is not hiding. He's not distant. He's waiting to be heard, not above the noise, but beneath it. So take heart. You're not alone in your desire to hear Him. Every longing soul has been where you are, and every soul that has waited, truly waited, has heard something sacred in return. Once you've heard God's voice, not with your ears, but with your heart, you begin to notice it more often. Not just in your quiet time, but in your ordinary life. You realize that the silence you create in prayer becomes a companion, not a place you leave behind. The stillness follows you into your work, your conversations, your worries, and even your disappointments. It doesn't mean the world becomes quieter. The noise will always be there. The opinions, the fears, the scrolling, the headlines. But something within you starts to change. The noise outside no longer rules the noise inside. You carry a calm that isn't from you, You carry God's voice like a candle in your soul. And even in crowded, chaotic places, the flame doesn't flicker as easily anymore. There's a beautiful paradox to hearing God. The more you listen, the less you need constant answers. His voice doesn't just give direction, it gives companionship. It reminds you that even when you don't know the next step, you are not walking alone. And that awareness becomes louder than any worry. There are days, of course, when it still feels hard. You sit in the quiet and hear nothing but your own breath. You ask questions and feel no response. You walk through sorrow and wonder if he's still near. But that's when the deepest faith grows. Because hearing God is not about chasing moments. It's about growing roots. And roots grow downward into hidden places. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." It doesn't say, "Be still and feel something," or "Be still and everything will change instantly." It simply says, "Be still." Know. That kind of knowing is slow. It's deep. It anchors you. Over time, you realize that God has been speaking in more ways than you noticed. Through people who showed up just when you needed them. Through nature, when the sunrise made you pause. Through a song that played at just the right moment. Through a verse that felt like it was written for your exact struggle. His voice is not limited to one method. He's a creative, personal, loving Father who speaks in the language you most understand, if you're listening. And listening is not passive. It's an act of trust. Every time you silence your phone, every time you step away from a screen, every time you take a deep breath instead of reacting, you're choosing to make room for God's whisper. That's how you hear him more. Not by trying harder, but by surrendering deeper. So if you find yourself longing to hear God, but unsure where to begin, start where you are. Right now. You don't have to fix your surroundings first. Just take a breath. Close your eyes. Whisper, "God, I'm listening." Then wait. You may not hear something today, but your spirit will begin to soften. And soon, in the most unexpected places, you'll hear a quiet assurance. "I am with you." That's his voice. Not loud, but unmistakable. And once you've heard it, even once, you'll never want to go back to the noise again.